Hello friends, welcome back to my channel Medicine Abonzion. Today we'll talk about ventilation's perfusion ratio. It's one of the most important topic regarding the respiratory systems, or we can say the physiology of respiratory system. First, in these cases, we'll talk about what is ventilations, then we'll talk about what is perfusions, and then we'll talk about the ventilation's perfusion ratio. Okay, so as I hope all of you know it, what do we mean by ventilations? Basically, we'll talk about what the pulmonary ventilations or the alveolar ventilations over here, because the air ultimately that will reach where within the alveoli over here. Now, basically, we can say that the pulmonary ventilations over here, we can say, or we can say the alveolar ventilations. So, if you write it over here, pulmonary ventilation. Try to understand from here. Ventilation means what? The gas exchange. The gas exchange. That means whatever the air that will come where within the alveoli. After coming within the alveoli, there will be what? The gas exchange. Okay. So we can write over here that amount of the air coming within. So let's write it over here. Amount of air coming within alveoli for exchange purpose. For exchange purpose, okay, because basically whenever we are taking the air, we are taking definitely what? The fresh air, the oxygen containing air. Now in these cases, I'll just figure out it in the three ways, I mean in the three levels. So for example, if I just in the upright conditions, whenever I'm in the standing positions, at that time whatever of the inspirations, expirations, as well as what the ventilations, basically whatever the ventilations we will see in the different parts of the lungs. So for this thing, if I just divide this part over here, if I consider from here to here, this is the first part, or you can say this is the number one apex part, apex or upright part. Okay, if I just consider this is the mid part over here, and if I just consider this is the basal part or down part over here. Okay. Now try to understand why we'll see that the ventilation process will be started over here. Why the air will come here? Okay, why it will get expanded? Because of what? Because of the intrapleural negative pressure. Because I have already explained why we will get the intrapleural negative pressures. Let's explain once more. Try to understand from this thing that this pleural membrane that is stuck with the what? With the lungs. Okay, and try to understand from these positions. If I talk about in terms of the apex part, whatever thing will get in terms of the apex part. Okay, see the apex, that means if I say in terms of the apex part, the chest wall that will try to get expanded outward with respect to this apex part, the chest wall that will try to get expanded, and due to the gravity of the lungs, this alveoli that will try to come downward. Try to understand, due to the gravity of the lungs, this will try to come downward. Here the gravitational force that will work more with respect to this one. Okay, now see the apex is trying to get expanded outward and it is trying to come inward. As a result, in these situations, we will get a negative pressures, we will get interpleural negative pressures, and for that thing we will get the expansions of the alveoli over here. For that thing we will get what? The expansions, or we will get the expanded alveoli over here. So in these cases, we'll get the negative pressures definitely. So how much negative pressures we'll get over here? We'll get around minus 10 centimeter of water. This much pressures we'll get where? Within the apex part. Okay, pressure. Now if you talk about in terms of, try to understand in terms of the middle part. In the middle part it will be what? That will be normal, that will be moderate. Because there will be neither that much expansions or not that much gravitational force. Yet it will be there, still it will be there, but not that much with respect to the apex part. So in this case, in the mid part, try to understand in the mid part, we'll get around minus 5 centimeter of water. This much pressure will get over here. And what about the third part? See, in the third part, try to understand from here, due to the gravity, the lungs is trying to come downward. The lungs would like to go downward. In the same way, if we just say the diaphragm also, the diaphragm also it is pulling downward. The diaphragm also pulling the what? Lung downward, and due to the gravity, the lung is also coming downward. As a result, we will see in this position the pressure that will be not that much, because in the same directions the lung is coming, in the same directions the diaphragm is also pulling the lung. That's why we'll get over here whatever thing we'll get the very less pressures. So in these cases we'll get around, so again we can see in the basal part we'll get around minus 2.5 centimeter of water. This much pressures we'll get over here. Now why did I say these pressure things? Because you have to understand fast as far as volume is concerned over here. Now for that thing, let's compare these things within a short part. Okay, now see, if I say for example it's the upper part, we'll get the size of the alveoli in the upper part like larger. In the mid part we will get medium, and in the basal part we will get the size of the alveolar lesser. Try to understand. Okay. See, as we said, the pressures within the apex part, the intrapleural negative pressures within the apex part, that will be maximum. Whenever the pressures will be maximum, definitely the the alveolar that will be expanded more. As the negative pressure is more over here, why? The chest is trying to go upward. The chest is trying to get expanded, and due to the gravity, the lung is trying to come inward. As a result, there will be what? Intrapleural negative pressures. We will see the intrapleural negative pressures. As a result, we will see the more, as we see, there will be the development of the more amount of the intrapleural negative pressure around minus 10 centimeter of water over here. As a result, the size of the alveoli there will be more. Okay. And the same in the middle part, we will get the moderate. That's why the size will be moderate size. That means mid size. And whatever this part, in this part, try to understand the pressure difference will be less. How much? Around minus 2.5 centimeter of water. As a result, the pressure here will be what? Less. So whenever the pressure will be less, definitely the expansion, the chances for the getting expansions will be what? Less also. So that's why the size of the alveoli in the lower part or in the basal part, that will be less. Okay. Now we'll talk about it in terms of the ventilations. Okay. So for that thing, let's draw this part over here. Now with respect to this pressure things, we'll talk about the ventilations. Now if you write it over here, the ventilation. Under normal circumstances, we will get this type of thing. Okay, now try to understand. Whenever we are talking in terms of the ventilation, ventilations means the air that will come, to get exchanged. Now see, the alveoli of the upper part already expanded due to the pressure changes, due to the more amount of the negative interpleural pressures. So whenever it is already expanded, very little amount of the air, because very little amount of the air that will come over here, because it's already expanded, we cannot stretch it further. Try to understand it. I'm repeating once again, it's very important concept. Due to having the negative interpleural pressures, the upper parts alveoli, they're already expanded, they're already stretched, we cannot stretch them further. So we can see the stretch, we can just make them stretch a little bit. So a little amount of the air that will come over here. Okay, but try to understand the lower part over here, it is not expanded that much because of what? It is having the less negative interpleural pressures. So that's why the chances for getting expanded is still there is a chances for this lower part alveoli to get expanded. We can make it stretch further. These things can be expanded further more and more. Okay, but these parts already expanded, so we cannot stretch or we cannot expand them further. Okay. Now try to understand. That's why we'll get over here the ventilations in the first, that means in the upper part. The ventilations in the upper part, definitely that will be less. Okay, in the mid part, there will be moderate ventilation. Whatever the basal part, within the basal part, the ventilation that will be maximum. Why? It is having still the chances to get expanded. Its size is not that much like this one. So it is having the small size. So whenever the air will come, it can expand it. It can be expanded. So as a result, the more chances for having the ventilation in the lower parts of the alveoli, that is the maximum over here. But in terms of the upper part, the chances for the ventilation that will be less, because it's already expanded. We cannot make it expandable further. Okay, it's already stretched. Now that's why we'll get over here the ventilations in the upper part, that will be the least, in the mid part that will be the moderate, and in the basal part there will be the ventilation maximum over here. Okay. Now try to understand from here that, okay, let's write it over here. If we say with respect to this upper part, so during inspiration, very little amount of air that will go where within the upper parts alveoli. As a result, we will see the ventilations that will be also little. In the mid part, we will get the moderate inspirations. During inspirations, moderate amount of air. Okay, so we'll get the ventilation moderate. During inspirations, the more the chances is maximum to get expanded forward the lower part alveoli. It is for the gravity as well as for the lung, weight of the lungs, or there is same thing, gravity as well as what, the pulling downward tendency of the diaphragm. So in this cases we can say that the ventilation during inspiration, the more amount of air, or you can say maximum amount of the air, if you compare among the three, so here the ventilation that will be maximum. Okay. Now we'll talk about the perfusion. We'll talk about the perfusions. For that thing we have to draw some part. Okay, let's draw this part over here. So I'm already erasing these things. We'll talk about the perfusion. Perfusions means the blood flow to the around the alveoli. Okay, the blood flow around the alveoli over here. So let's try to draw again the lungs over here. Okay, I'm using the black one. Okay, let's erase this part also. Hope you understood this thing. The pressure difference, that's the most important concept over here. Okay, if you can understand, then you can also understand the perfusions very easily. Okay, let's draw a side view. Sorry guys. Okay, now see. If I just say in the same way, in terms of the ventilations, I have already said. Now in terms of the perfusions, okay, let's talk about this part over here. Now I'm just taking the first alveoli, I will get over here. Okay, the second alveoli I am just considering it over here. That means the mid one. Definitely have to make the size larger for it. And for example, for this thing, in the least size. Okay, now we will try to draw the right heart over here, from where actually the blood is coming. Okay. Let's draw in this way. Okay, so let's make the pulmonary artery over here, then it will be easier for you. Okay, let's draw in this way. Okay, now as we know, from here through the pulmonary artery, the blood that will be what, pumped from the right ventricle to the lungs. Okay, for example, we will, after that we will get the branches that will be divided over here. So one branch we are getting in this way, that is supplying the blood. In the same way, we will talk about in this part. Okay, in the same way. I have to draw it fast anyway. Sorry for being late. Okay, see. So if we talk in terms of the trying to understand in terms of the perfusions. Perfusions means whenever the air is coming over here, when the air is coming over here, okay, the air that will be exchanged with the what? The air that will be exchanged with the what? In terms of the oxygen and carbon dioxide. So definitely what do you know that the partial pressures of oxygen is how much? Near about 100, right? And here is less. As a result, we will see the oxygen that will come over here. Okay, and the same way we will see what? The carbon dioxide here is around, whenever before coming, the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide that will be around 46 mm of Hg. But here we will get for the carbon dioxide that is how much? Around 40. So definitely the carbon dioxide that will go from here to here in this way. Okay, now try to understand if we say in terms of the perfusions over here. Okay, let's do it over here. Okay, now see, whenever we are talking in terms of the perfusion, that means the blood flow. This perfusion depends on the two things. The perfusions of the blood depend on two things. See, whenever we are talking in terms of the the left ventricle, sorry, the right ventricle, that is pumping equally. That is pumping by equal amount of the forces. But try to understand whenever the blood is going in these directions, that means what? Against the gravity. So whenever it is going against the gravity, definitely that much amount of the blood that will be not able to go. So as a result, we can say the gravity that will pull down the blood from these directions to downward. Okay, in the same way, it is what? Towards the gravity. As a result, the blood flow here will be the maximum, here will be the moderate, here will be also less. Okay, so try to understand whenever the blood is going by the pumping of the what? Right ventricle, the blood is trying to go in the in the upper part, in the middle part, in the lower part. Here, due to the gravity, the amount of the blood that will be not that will be not enough to go in these regions. Okay, so in this case, we can say that here the perfusion will be less. Another thing, the perfusion depends on two things. One is perfusion pressure. Here the perfusion pressure will be least amount. The perfusion pressure that will be least. But see in these cases, the pressure that will be transferred from here to the downward parts. As a result, in this position, the perfusion pressure that will be maximum. So the perfusion pressure, another is what? The vessel resistance. Another is vessel or resistance. Now try to understand from here that in the upper part alveoli, the size of the alveoli is more. Definitely, whenever the size of the alveoli is more, definitely there is a chances for the compressions of the vessels. So if the size is more, the chances for getting compressed for the blood vessel, that will be also more. So as a result, we will see in these cases, in these cases, the compressions of blood vessel, that will be also more. The tendency for compressions of the blood vessel, that will be more, because size is maximum. Why the size is maximum? I have already explained for the pressure differences over here. Okay, but see in these cases, the pressure is coming towards the lower parts of the alveoli. So the perfusion pressure is more, the size of the alveoli is less, so the resistance will be also less. Vessel resistance, that will be also less. So compression of vessel, that will be also less. Try to understand, in the lower part of the alveoli, the perfusion pressure is more. Along with that, we are getting what? The perfusion that is more. Along with that thing, we are getting what? The size of the alveoli is least. We can say the minimum. If we just compare between these three, the least amount of the size we will have for what? The lower part of the alveoli. So there is a chances for getting compressed for the blood vessel, that will be also less. So in this case, if we just see, the perfusion pressure is more, along with that what? The resistance for the blood vessel, that is least. As a result, the compressions, the chances for getting compressed for the blood vessel, that will be also least. So in these cases, here the perfusions will be more. The blood that will come here more. There the blood that will come here the least. So in these cases we will get the least perfusions. In these cases we will get what? The moderate perfusion. In these cases we will get the maximum perfusion. Now if we just compare in between, try to understand, if we just compare in between the perfusion and the ventilation ratio, let's draw this part over here and try to understand you. See, in the first part, if you draw in the first part, size is more, size is moderate, the lower part size is less. See, here the perfusion. See here the perfusion pressure is less, ventilation is less. So here in this case, if we just do the ventilation ratio for the upper part, if we just do the ratio for the upper part, try to understand the ventilation that will be less, but the perfusion that will be very less. So in this cases we will get whatever the thing. Try to understand. Moderately, what do you know in these cases? Try to understand from here. The ventilation perfusion ratio that will be not maintained well. We will get the the normal range for the ventilation perfusion ratio where within the mid part. While getting these things, let's talk about this part first. So for that thing, let's remove this part. Let's remove this part. See, when you are talking in terms of the inspirations, during inspirations, how much amount of the air we are taking, the tidal volume. We are taking the tidal volume. So if I say the minute ventilations, if we talk in terms of the minute ventilation, try to understand how much the air that will come within 1 minutes. So if you in 1 minutes the respiratory rate, that means it will be what? Tidal volume multiply the respiratory rate. Tidal volume multiply or respiratory rate. Now if we say for example the tidal volume, if we just assume 500 ml, and for example the respiratory rate I am taking in terms of 12 times, okay. So if we get here, how much we will get? 6000 ml. So 6000 ml we are getting, or we can say 6 liter. So we are getting how much? The minute ventilations in 1 minute, how much air is coming over here for ventilation purpose? That is 6 liter. But try to understand, when you are just doing the taking the tidal volume during the journey, during the during the conducting zone, whenever the air is going, there are many air resistance. For example, from the nostrils to the terminal bronchiole, I am repeating once again, from the nostrils to the terminal bronchioles, there are many places where we will get the air resistance. So how much air that will be resistant over here? We will get around 150 ml of air that will face resistance in these cases. So that will get stuck. So 150 ml of the air that will get stuck within the conducting zone. That means from the nostrils to the terminal bronchioles. Okay. So if we just say in these cases, so actually how much air is going within the alveolar for ventilation purpose? Definitely that will be not the tidal volume. You have to if you just make it correct, 500 minus 150 multiply 12. We'll get how much over here? Definitely we'll get 3. 50 multiply 12, we will get around 4 liter. We will get around 4 liter. So 4 liter, or we can say 4000 ml. 4000 ml. Okay, we are getting how much? 4000 ml of the air is going in 1 minute. 4000 ml of air is going in 1 minute. Now if you just say in terms of the perfusion, so we are getting the ventilation how much? Ventilations we are getting 4 liter. Okay, now if you talk in terms of the perfusions over here, how do we know that each heart in 1 minute, how much blood it pumps? In terms of, if we say in terms of the 1 minute, so definitely the heart that is pumping the blood in 1 minute, the heart that pumps the blood around how much? 5 liter. That's the cardiac output. So if we say over here, we will get how much? The perfusion over here, the 5 liter, or you can say 4000 ml and 5000 ml. Now if you do the ratio, the proper ratio for it, we will get how much? 4000 by 5000. So we will get around 0.8. So this is the ratio. So we will get around how much? 0.8. But this ratio is found where? This is the actual ratio. We will get where? Within the mid part. So we'll get this ratio over in the mid part, ventilations by perfusions. But if you talk in terms of the first part, that means if you just say, for example, for the alveoli that is present in the upper zone of the lung, here try to understand, ventilation will be less. Why the ventilation will be less, I have already explained. Okay, the perfusions will be less because of the pressure difference, because of what, the gravity. The gravity is trying to pull down the pressure downwards. So in these cases the perfusion pressure will be less, the size of the alveoli will be also more. As a result, whatever the thing will see, the ventilation will be less, the perfusion will be also less. So in these cases, but try to understand, if we just go up to downward, if we go up to downward, from up to downward, okay, let's so over here, up to downward, the ventilation, if we go up to downward, the ventilation slightly increased. But if we just say, if we go up to down, the perfusion that's increased severely. We'll get the more, we'll get the, if we compare in between the ventilation and perfusions, in the ventilation that will slightly increase, but perfusion that will be increased what, for more amount. So in this case, if we just compare the ventilation perfusion ratio in these cases, so the ventilation perfusion that will be less than 0.8 over in these cases, that will be less than, that will be less than 0.8. Now what about in these cases, we'll get the moderate ventilation by perfusion, how much we'll get, around 0.8. and what about this thing, we'll get more than 0. Okay. We'll get the ventilation perfusion. Okay, let me show over here, then it will be better for you. Okay. See, in these cases, the ventilation that will be slightly decreased, the perfusion that will be severely decreased. It will be severely decreased. As a result, we will get the ratio that will be more than 0.8. In this case, it will be normally, but in these cases, the ventilation by perfusion ratio that will be less than 0.8. Okay, that's all for the ventilation perfusion. I have already explained what is ventilation, what is perfusion. After that, what is the ratio. So in the next part of the video, I'll talk about what type of the pathological conditions we will get in these cases and the different kinds of the diseases over here. Okay, so in the next video soon.